In the dark of the midnight have I oft hid my face, while the storms howl above me, and there's no hiding place. Amidst the crash of the thunder, precious Lord, hear my cry. Keep me safe till the storm passes by. Till the storm passes over, till the thunder sounds no more, till the clouds roll forever from the sky. Hold me fast, let me stand in the hollow of thy hand. Keep me safe till the storm passes by.
In our last lesson, we studied about the history of the name of the Seventh Adventist Reform Movement, and we left off with the first delegation session after World War II, which was in 1948 at The Hague in Holland, and it was held on July 5 through 15. There were some important decisions that affected the work of the General Conference as a whole in 1948. The circular letter that we're presenting here is from the delegation session dated July 15th, 1948. And notice the name of the church, again, listed there, is the General Conference of the Seventh Adventist Reform Movement. Keep that in mind. The location of the General Conference in 1948 was no longer Germany, but as you can see, it was in Basel, Switzerland. And of course, it gives the dates of the session, July 5 through the 15th. And notice this declaration at that time. Having in view the great work that is before us, and the short time which is at our disposal, after many prayers and considerations, we are fully persuaded that we should take further steps in the reorganization of the movement on a proper basis. It was decided at USA to be the place where we should establish the General Conference headquarters. It was 1948. The war was just over. They had some hard times in Europe. Some places had civil wars still going on. And at that point, they realized that the best place to hold a General Conference headquarters was in the United States of America. And that is what this resolution was about. For this reason, the following decision was taken, that the best man with experience would take charge of this great work. As you know, that Brother Kotzel was selected as president of the General Conference, and also Brother Mueller as vice president, and Brother Nikolic was also selected as secretary of the General Conference, and also appointed to take charge of the work in the United States. So the delegates there decided not only to select some of the officers, but also to invite Brother Dimitri Nikolic from Australia to come and work in the United States and take that responsibility. It goes on, for such a purpose arrangements have been made for his going to take charge of this work and to call a conference that the work may be organized on a proper basis. Also, the president of the General Conference should assist Brother Nikolic in connection with this reorganization. We appeal to you, dear brothers and sisters, to give all the support and strength in their hands to be able to bring to completion the great work which is of so great importance to our movement. We recommend them with full authority to act to the best of their ability on behalf of this movement. So, in regard to this move of the headquarters to the United States, the delegation stated a letter of empowerment by the delegation of 1948, also dated July 15th. And here's the document here. You can take a look at it. And this document reads as follows. By the way, before we read it, notice there again, the name of the General Conference is listed on there, and again, the headquarters is listed there. It says, we, the undersigned delegates of the General Conference, empowered the Executive Committee, his President and Vice President, his Secretary, to revise the constitution of our movement in harmony with the law and the testimonies, and also to respect and include the points of doctrine upon which we agree at this conference. Also to formulate the constitution, rules, and regulations upon which our movement is to function. Also to express clearly the way of our organization as a movement. We also empower them to seek ways and means to establish the center of the General Conference in the United States of America, to select a place and to organize a central office. So this is the empowerment by the delegation session, and as a result, on April 4th, 1949, a board of directors was selected, and this board of directors met, and here is the document of the minutes of their very first meeting. And here's what it says. Brother C. Kotzel was voted and elected to be the chairman of the corporation. Brother D. Nikolic was voted and elected to be the secretary of the corporation. Sister L. Wassermiller was voted and elected to be the treasurer of the corporation. It was proposed and decided that the number of the committee of the corporation be formed of 7. It was discussed and decided the need of forming an association which should be incorporated according to the provision of law. For this reason, it was decided a constitution to be drafted with articles and bylaws in order to govern the members of the corporation here and abroad. The drafted constitution and articles and bylaws were read and unanimously accepted. It was decided that the home of Brother and Sister A. Wassermiller be the temporary headquarters of the corporation. Now, by the way, keep in mind that this organizational committee that is formed here, this is not the General Conference Committee. It is the committee of the organization or the corporation, the General Conference Corporation. And since many of the committee members lived abroad, they chose these individuals to be part of the committee for the sake of legal organization. If you'll notice here, the home address is, and notice the name again, Seventh-day Adventist Reform Movement, General Conference, USA, 4824 Baker Avenue, Sacramento, 17, California. And once again, I show you this document here in its original form so you can see the handwritten format of it. The mailing address is Seventh-day Adventist Reform Movement, General Conference, USA, P.O. Box 234 OP, standing for Oak Park, Sacramento, California. This report was read and unanimously accepted, and if you'll notice the signatures there, Carlos Kotzel, D. Nikolic, Lottie Wassermiller, John Ensinger, Alex Wassermiller, and G. Nikolic. Before the church could incorporate, they had to formulate some bylaws. And here is the document again of April 1949, the bylaws of the Seventh-day Adventist Reform Movement General Conference. And as we take a look, notice this page here, we're going to read it more directly. It is Article 1, and Article 1 states, the name of the headquarters of the denomination is, and notice the name, in the bylaws, this is 1949, Seventh-day Adventist Reform Movement General Conference. And notice what was asked of all affiliated organizations. It says all affiliated organizations to the headquarters bear the name Seventh-day Adventist Reform Movement of blank according to the name of the country. For example, Seventh-day Adventist Reform Movement, American Union Conference. Next point, that the city of Sacramento in the state of California is selected to be the head office of our denomination. A change of its headquarters can only be done through the delegates of the General Conference or through its executive committee. The seal, point number 4 down further, the seal of the denomination will be a small one, a medium-sized one bearing the name of Seventh-day Adventist Reform Movement, General Conference, USA. Article 3 speaks about calling a delegation session and at what point the session is to be declared legal to transact business. We read it here. It says, when at least 3 out of 5 parts of the delegates are present, their decisions become legal and recognized by the affiliated conferences and churches throughout the world. Now, this is very important, this particular statement here, declaring when a session is legal. It has to have 3 out of 5 delegates present. And notice down further, delegates who cannot be present at the conference are entitled to entrust their vote to some of those present to represent them. I am sure that you have heard a great deal about the issue of the proxy vote that is in this particular bylaws. keep in mind that without the proxy vote, other difficulties can be involved, and we'll discuss some of those difficulties a little bit later. But this issue of a proxy vote was not something new. It was not something added at the last minute by one individual. It had been in our church for quite a long time because our church had been quite familiar with dealing with totalitarian governments and not allowing our delegates to go to sessions. Now, if you take a look, the bylaws, if you remember, of the International Missionary Society, American Union, 1927, take a look at this. Look at this document here. And here's what it says. It's in the bylaws, 1927, New Jersey. It says to make bylaws not inconsistent with the laws of the state or the United States for the management of its property and the regulation of its affairs, which bylaws now or hereafter made may contain provisions empowering any absent member entitled to vote at any meeting of the members of the corporation to be represented and vote at any meeting by proxy, authorized in writing, and said bylaws may prescribe the qualifications of the parties and the form of the written authorization. Such written authorization shall be valid after 3 years from its date. So here the issue of a proxy vote was well known since 1927, as they show up in the documentation here formed by the International Missionary Society, the Seventh-day Adventist Reform Movement, American Union Conference, organized in 1927. Back to the General Conference bylaws of 1949, we'll address some of these issues a little bit later as well. Article 4 includes the following in point number 2 out the ownership of properties. It says the buying and selling of properties and other work in connection with this corporation shall be written in, notice, the name of the Seventh-day Adventist Reform Movement, General Conference, USA. Now, these bylaws were signed by Carlos Kotzel as the president and Dean Nikolic as the secretary, together with 5 other members of the committee. Now, since Brother Kotzel had worked in Argentina and spoke Spanish, and his English was not so good, it's interesting that we have here a statement by D.W. Green's office. He made this statement on December 3rd, 1953, a few years later, but he, as an attorney, writes this statement for us. He says, I, the undersigned, hereby testify that on April 1949, I was engaged by Mr. C. Kotzel and Mr. D. Nikolic to assist in forming the corporation of the SDA Reform Movement General Conference. At a special meeting in my office, at which the articles and bylaws of this corporation were prepared, discussed, and finally adopted by the 7 members of the board of directors present, I personally translated these articles and bylaws into the Spanish language for the benefit of Mr. Kotzel. Each member of the board of directors was given a copy of the articles and the bylaws of the corporation to read. And as each was asked whether he knew and agreed to their content, they gave their approval by placing their signatures upon these documents. Now, this statement was made by the attorney who actually assisted in the legal procedure in getting the General Conference incorporated in the state of California. Now, since Spanish was not Brother Kotzel's native language, most of his documents that we quote from were written in German. So what did Sister Wassermiller do? Well, we take a look at this document here. You can see here what Sister Wassermiller wrote. She wrote this on December 10th, 1953. She says, after reading the articles and bylaws of the above-mentioned corporation, I was requested to translate them into the German language to Mr. Kotzel. After discussion was made in regard to these articles and bylaws, and each one of the 7 members of the board of directors, including Mr. Kotzel, had knowledge of their contents, they personally signed these documents. The statement was written on December 10, 1953, when it was heard that Brother Kotzel denied having a clear knowledge of the contents of the bylaws, stating he did not clearly understand English. So, to make sure that he did understand what the bylaws were all about, they not only had him translated into Spanish, but also German for his clarification. So he cannot say that he did not understand something in them. Therefore, the General Conference was incorporated on April 8, 1949 in Sacramento, California. And here you have a page of the incorporation document stating its legal corporation. It shows the church's name when it was registered. And this was, by the way, 2 years prior to 1951. Prior to the 1951 session. 2 full years. And 2 full years prior to 1951, there was no problem with the name Seventh-day Adventist Reform Movement General Conference. Now, Brother Kotzel was directly involved in this work of registration. He wrote the letter originally in German, and of course we have here the English translation as well. And here are some statements that he makes in regards to his involvement in the registration of the General Conference. And here's what it says. We were able to organize our members into 2 conferences and also register our General Conference. The Lord helped us wonderfully in everything. The name of the General Conference is as follows. Seventh-day Adventist Reform Movement General Conference, P.O. Box 234, Oak Park, Sacramento, California, USA. All General Conference publications, by the way, were intended eventually to come from this office. Notice the next part of the letter. It will be about 9 months before we can permanently settle here. Concerning our plan of printing a Sabbath Watchman, a paper for the youth which comes at present from Holland, and a health paper, How Shall I Be Well? We must wait till next year, God willing, till we leave permanently here. We ask you to excuse the delay in sending lessons to Europe, and also the future delays which may take place. When all is concentrated in our new center, all lessons and literature will be published punctually, God willing, unless political events prevent this. So after the announcement that the General Conference was registered in the United States, along with its official name, several unions acknowledged the organizational achievements. We will evaluate those documents just a little bit later on as we consider the decisions of the 1948 session. Now, the 1948 session also made some decisions regarding the work in North America, specifically with the North American Union leadership. And you can take a look at this document again here. And here's what it says. Decision of the General Conference, July 5 to 15, 1948. We decide that the position taken by the brethren in North America, A. Derschler and W. Velp, is a rebellious one and is a rejection of the General Conference and her president. Because of their attitudes in the past years, the continuation of their office as ministers has been brought into question. The settling of this matter is entrusted to 2 brethren sent by the General Conference to North America who will call for a union conference. So this is a decision by the General Conference of 1948 regarding the work in North America. The American Union was dissolved, and as a result, a session was held in 1949. This session of the American Union was held in St. Louis, Missouri, March 4, 1949. And you can take a look here at the actual declaration. Here's what it says. We, the undersigned delegates, were present at the conference held in St. Louis, Missouri from March 1 through 6, 1949, with the purpose of reorganizing the North American Union. Herewith we desire and decide in harmony with its instructions through the intervention of the General Conference that all property of the International Missionary Society of the Seventh-day Adventist Reform Movement American Union be submitted to the General Conference at the earliest convenience. Since the 2 brothers A.W. Derschler and W.O. Velp have been working against the General Conference, they have been discharged and disfellowshipped. Therefore, the further retaining of the property of the International Missionary Society of the Seventh-day Adventist Reform Movement American Union by the 2 brothers A.W. Derschler and W.O. Velp, we consider as a great sin and a robbery of the property of God. The name International Missionary Society was the registered name of the American Union, as you remember. And this letter was signed, or this statement was signed by all the delegates, including brethren Carlos Kotzel and D. Nikolic. The 2 representatives at the session from the General Conference were Brother Kotzel and Brother Nikolic. In relationship to these 2 brethren, Derschler and Velp, the first resolution in regards to them was in 1938 by the General Conference Committee when they held a session in Basel, Switzerland, January 1938. Resolution 4 reads, we consider the position taken by the brethren of North America to be completely contrary to the entire rules of our faith and to be rebellion. They shall be once more asked by a letter of the entire General Conference to set their affairs in order immediately. We consider such a position taken by them that the General Conference is apostatized to be completely wrong and contrary to the principles of our message. So apparently they were sending circular letters to various union conferences calling the General Conference in a state of apostasy. Brother Kotzel described the work of these leaders in the American Union in the circular letter of April 18, 1949. You remember that's the letter we looked at that announced that they were involved in the organization and registration of the General Conference. You remember that letter a few minutes ago. Well, now let's take a look at some other things that were written in that letter. As Brother Kotzel writes about those leaders of the American Union. Strong words, I must say, are about to be read here about those particular brethren by this brother. Soon we shall have run our course, and then we shall enter our eternal home. We shall be at home with our dear brethren and sisters, with the 144,000, amongst whom will be our dear sister White. Then there shall be no more suffering, no more pain, no more battling against sin and against the enemies of truth. And I'm skipping through the letter from time to time. This later conflict is an especially difficult one against those who dare to rise up against the Church of God. Such souls lose the entire control of themselves and also the truth. For they call right wrong, wrong right, evil good and good evil, error truth and truth error. Under what terrible deceptions are these souls laboring? I mean those men and women who had once the light of this last Reformation and then suddenly began to fight against this Reform movement with all the means at their disposal. It is without doubt the evil spirit of Saul which drives them to persecute the chosen servants of God and makes them incapable of realizing their own evil character. As they have lost their love of the truth and of the brethren, the Lord has allowed them to come into this satanical position as a punishment. 2 Thessalonians. It is quite clear that under such circumstances, the workings of the powers of darkness must reveal themselves in these rebellions. In nearly all rebellions, one can discern three distinct spirits which the leaders of these uprisings possess. One of these spirits is that of criticizing, complaining, slandering, betrayal, and the twisting of facts. Truth is called error and error truth. There is manifested a stubbornness to remain in error and a spirit of persecution against God's faithful children and representatives on the earth. We find this same spirit in Revelation 12:10. It is the same powerful spirit which Satan poured upon the third part of the angels in order to draw them with him into the pit, and that he might not be alone. Today he gives the same spirit to all rebels. He starts at the leaders and then goes on to others. Those who listen to their seemingly logical and just complaints, and those who read them will be caught in the net of Satan unless they are very careful. A Christian who is not on his guard will be influenced by one of these three spirits, just as a careless fly is overcome and become a prey to the web. The three spirits, like frogs, will bring into the church of God disunity in the form of rebellions and uprisings, so that all dissatisfied, complaining souls will be shaken out before they do their work of destruction in the last great conflict. As you can see, he's getting very strong on what this is all about. He calls them like the three spirits like the frogs, and you remember in Revelation, the three unclean spirits like frogs. It says, have nothing whatsoever to do with them, my dear brethren and sisters. Throw their circulars into the fire without reading them. We must battle on amidst the noise of these three unclean spirits, who will soon draw the world into the last great conflict from which the inhabitants of this earth are never to emerge again. These movements do not draw us upward, but downward into the bottomless pit, to the powers of darkness, to that place from where the three unclean frogs issue. After all that has been said, I cannot fail to mention the word concerning our dear brother and sister Nicholich. I do this because the former brethren in Denver have done all they could in letters and circulars to destroy the good name of this brother and sister in a most unchristian and slanderous way. By this they wish to rob God's work and the leading brethren of the confidence of the members. Brother and sister Nicholich have had great conflicts here. They did not fight for their own, but for God's work. The Lord helped them wonderfully. It was no small matter to withstand our former leading brethren, who know how to turn everything and twist it to suit themselves and to draw them to account for this rebellion. Brother and sister Nicholich were just the right instruments in God's hands to withstand the terrible attacks from the brethren in Denver, who were developing into the worst enemies and to save what could be saved. No other brother could have done this unthankful work better than he did with his wife. All that has been written about hardness, dictatorship, unreconcilatory spirit, and lies, etc., in the circulars and letters from Denver are misunderstandings and slanders, as can be seen by the enclosed general report to the General Conference. Through them, they will get some idea of the terrible work of the rebellion, especially as most of our presidents have received so many circulars and letters from Denver. We cannot allow the enemy with the three unclean spirits to work in our ranks, throughout the whole world without our having instructed our members on our part. Please remember these three dangerous spirits. Put all literature of the evil one immediately out of your houses, so that our hearts may not be corrupted. So this is the letter of the General Conference President explaining some of the reasons why they had such a discussion about this group from Denver in 1948, and why they felt it necessary to disfellowship them and remove them from office. Now, the procedure of disfellowshipping and all that is another story. I don't want to get into all of that right now, whether it's right or wrong. But this is just giving you some idea of what was going on back at that time. Now, various organizational units signified their agreement with the registration of the work in California of the General Conference on April 8, 1949, as well as their dealings with the leadership from the brethren in Denver. And here we produce the documentation here from the German Union. As you can see, the date is May 24th, 1949. It was a meeting in Solingen by the members, workers, and union officers of the German Union. Now, this is the original in German and the signatures of all the members that were present in those discussions. Among these signatures, you will notice the signatures of Brethren Ringelberg, Mueller, Kotzel, Stark, and others. Brother Kotzel, as General Conference President, was presiding in those meetings. And here's what it says. All delegates, workers, and canvassers of the German Union, which have come together at this time for our yearly conference in Solingen, declare with one voice that they will stay faithful to the principles of the General Conference and to the same. They absolutely refuse to have anything to do with the dark machinations of the former rebellious leadership in USA. They are all of the opinion that the brethren from Denver have put a serious rebellion in scene with which our brethren in Germany and in the other countries in Europe have nothing to do with. We reject the Denver direction decidedly in pleading that they leave us and all our brethren finally in peace with their slanderous letters and circulars. All what comes from their side they will throw in the fire. Our brothers and sisters consider it an annoyance to be overwhelmed with such circulars. We all stay firm to God and His truth of reform, to our General Conference who watches over this, and to our leading brethren who are willing to sacrifice their lives for this truth. These few lines for our brethren in USA and Canada. Well, we plead with them never to believe the false and bad announcements from the other side. Also, Brother Adamczak, with whose name the brethren from Denver did much propaganda, as if he would stay on their side, declared open at the conference that he has nothing to do with them and rejects fully their rebellion. He also sees today not only the necessity of the dissolving of the union, but also the disfellowship of the main guilty ones. Then we have the statement of the Missionary Society of the Seventh Adventist Reform Movement European Division. This is dated March 14th, 1950. Again, you can see the document, the original, and of course we have here the translation. This document was signed by Brethren Luft, Mueller, Ringelberg, and Kistner. It says, the European Union and missionary fields of the denomination of the Seventh-day Adventist Reform Movement declare most solemnly that they all, without exception, are loyal in this work of the General Conference of the Seventh-day Adventist Reform Movement, with a center in Sacramento, 18, California, USA, 3031 Franklin Boulevard. We respect their decisions made 1948 during the General Conference in Den Haag and are united by the principles of that denomination. We have no sympathy to other groups and individuals which are not with this work, and may testify that our unions and missionary fields, which have existed for some decades, are united with the General Conference, and their leaders are in harmony. We also have a documentation here from the Brazilian Union. I don't have the original, but I have this copy here. Sao Paulo, April 5th, 1950. We testify in the capacity of Brazilian Union Conference. We are in harmony with the agreements made during the 1948 General Conference held in Den Haag, Holland in June 1948. Furthermore, we also recognize the leadership elected as long as some will firmly remain in the principles of faith and act according to the agreements made by the General Conference Committee. We fully disapprove all the rebellious rise in the USA by family Velp and other unsanctified elements. Other acknowledgments we have are from Denmark, Finland, Sweden, Norway, March 30th, 1950. We have this document here. As you can see that. With all these documentation, it seems that the brethren in Denver have been causing quite a stir in various units of the General Conference around the world, obviously sending circulars and letters and visitations. to settle some of the issues that were going on from the 1930s already, as we have read there in the General Conference Committee resolution. The 1948 session decided to send Brother Nicholas to move to the United States. And he immigrated to the United States. The decision of the committee, July 19th, 1948, you can take a look at that documentation. Again, the letter was written on the General Conference letterhead, used by Brother Mueller during his term as president, and at the address of his residence in Switzerland. Again, the official name recognized by the General Conference in 1948. This is prior to 1951. Division in our ranks was General Conference of Seventh-day Adventist Reform Movement. The letter states, "We, the undersigned, testify that Mr. and Mrs. D. Nicholas desire permission to permanently live in the United States of America. The reason for this is that at the recent General Conference session of the Seventh-day Adventist Reform Movement was selected as Secretary of the General Conference. At the same time, he was also appointed to take charge of the organization of our movement in the United States. The center of our General Conference in the future will be located in the USA." This is why Brother Nicholas was sent to the United States. He was elected Secretary. They decided to move the headquarters to the United States, and as a result decided to relocate him as well. Now, Brother Kotzel was in favor of moving the headquarters to USA and Brother Nicholas to be leading the work here. He gave a power of attorney to D. Nicholas, September 28th, 1948. You can see the original document together with its translation. It says, "We hereby authorize Brother D. Nicholas, Secretary of the General Conference, to receive tithe monies and other gifts of our brothers and sisters in North America in the event that the leading brethren there should resist the reorganization decided upon by the meeting of the General Conference. He also has the right to take all steps necessary to protect and preserve the work of the Reformation there from harm both spiritual and material. Brother Nicholas does nothing in his own authority, but he is sent by the General Conference and acts in full agreement with it. All attacks which are directed against him by others in order to hinder the execution of the resolutions of the delegates of the General Conference are in reality directed against the whole work of the Reformation and are to be considered to be insurrections, rebellions. Every member of the Reformation knows what a great sin this is. Let us therefore work together with the Reformation and its leadership in love and harmony, so that the Lord need not reject anyone. We beg that all dear brothers and sisters, especially also the Bible workers, have confidence in this reorganization, for it was thoroughly discussed and considered by the delegates of the General Conference. Be humble and pray diligently. Then the Lord will give you light upon and make clear to you the necessity of this step decided by the meeting of the General Conference. In order to make possible its execution, it was necessary that the delegates of the General Conference elected and designated Brother Nicholas as president of our work of Reformation in the North America. If you remember, they dissolved the North American Union at the General Conference session and appointed Brother Nicholas to lead out. It goes on. He has the right to convene conferences there in order to inform the dear brothers and sisters of this decision. This regulation is in harmony with our principles on page 22 in the German edition. Now, this document also includes the signatures of Carlos Kotzel and was given to D. Nicholas, authorizing him to reorganize the work in North America, and also appealing to members to support Brother Nicholas in the work of reorganizing the Union Conference. When Brother Nicholas came to the United States, how was he treated by the brethren in Denver? Here we have a documentation of the brethren who had a meeting with some of those leaders. It says, "We, the undersigned, declare what transpired on the 4th of January, 1949, in the home of Brother A. Wassenmiller, 4824 Baker Avenue, Sacramento, California. On the same day, brothers A. Derschler, O. Velth, O. Kramer, and Sister Grew were with the above-mentioned family. Present was also Elder Nicholas and his wife. Among many other discussions that took place on this occasion, the following question was put by Brother Elder Nicholas to Brother Derschler. Did you put 2 pages of complaints against me at the Office of Immigration? The answer was, yes, I did. First, I heard that somebody in the East inquired about you, and I went and explained the whole situation. Where did you make this complaint? The answer was at Denver, the immigration office. Where else? He said at San Francisco, and also at Sacramento in company with Brother Kramer at the immigration office. Sister Grew then intervened and said, what about it? Had they not reported you, I would have done that. Elder Nicholas said that he only wanted to confirm his conviction in reference to the complaint. Signed was D. Nicholas, G. Nicholas, L. Wassermiller, and A. Alex Wassermiller. That is when Brother Nicholas came to the United States and they organized the work as we read some of the documentation earlier. Now this International Missionary Society as a worldwide body, the first steps were taken to organize that body in May of 1951 in Holland. Brother Adamczak explains the problem in the Reform Movement in 1951 and how they were organized. In 1948, Joseph Adamczak was not only a delegate, but he was also the chairman of the General Conference session at that time. Now, this letter is written after the division between Brethren Kotzel and Nikolic. So keep in mind, when it comes to 1951 in a little bit in our next presentation. But in 1951, there was a division between Brother Carlos Kotzel and Brother Dmitry Nikolic. That was a division. But this letter here of Joseph Adamczak to Yisio Jans on June 22nd, 1951 explains another group that was organized. Let's take a look at this documentation. You can see here, of course, the original was there in German. Now, from his perspective, there were three issues that caused a division. Notice here, the so-called GC. Now, when he says the so-called GC, this is talking about the one that met in Zeist, Holland. This is the one that Brother Nikolic and Kotzel were meeting together at. He says the so-called GC has for 15 days contended impetuously and strongly for the highest office. Furthermore, for the house in USA in which Brother Nikolic lives and Kotzel would like to have. And the third point is the question of marriage. So here were three issues that he believes were at stake at the session in 1951. He says, my dear Isio, I do not know who is the worst among the contending men. Only the one thing is clear to me, that all of them together are bad. Now, he identifies his position regarding divorce and remarriage. In the same document, he says, upon the foundation of the Bible and the testimony since 1915, I stand firmly to the teaching of the matter of marriage as it is written, and to be sure that the innocent one is permitted to marry again after the divorce has been secured. So this is his personal conviction. He explains that both groups, the Kotzel group and the Nikolic group, have left the denomination. It says, oh, what confused heads! Because Nikolic as well as Kotzel disobey the principles and do not want to become reconciled. Therefore, we are not permitted to have anything to do with them. If they should change and repent, then the way and admittance into the denomination is open to them. Then he gives information that those who have been united with the American Union have formed their own general conference. Notice this. For your information, I tell you, my dear Isio, that we, during the days in Holland, from the 5th to the 16th of May, have laid the foundation in reference to organization. And Brother A. Derschler has been elected as president of the GC. So, you've heard many times the split that happened in 1951 between Brother Kotzel and Brother Nikolic. In reality, according to this document, there was another group, a third group, that we need to keep in mind. The one that Brother Kotzel earlier called the three unclean spirits of Revelation, if you can remember that. Now, that group themselves organized together, and Brother Derschler was elected as the president. Another letter, this is the letter from Derschler and Kramer to Luchelio, dated March 9th, 1952. It is true the American Union has no claim to any tithes of tithes. Nevertheless, at our gathering in Holland, plans were drawn to establish an international committee with its seat in America. These plans and proposals were given due consideration before the assembled Union Conference in 1951, and with the authorization of the brethren from England, Germany, Holland, etc., were put into effect. Brother Derschler was chosen as chairman of this organization, and Brother Kramer as acting secretary for him. In its capacity, the International Committee is the preliminary move to reestablish the old General Conference of former years. The Reform Movement has used this name, International Committee, when the first international relations were taken up after 1914. They function in general like a General Conference, only with a humble aspect. Whether we will ever reestablish a General Conference again will remain a question to be decided in the future. This name, General Conference, has become very distasteful and obnoxious. Those uniting with us in spirit may show their fidelity to this cause by supporting the International Committee in the manner as a General Conference should be supplied, since the International Committee is incurring some expenses in carrying on the work. So as you can see, they had set up another organizational structure separate from the General Conference session of 1951. Now, why did this Denver group become dissatisfied with some brethren in Europe and begin to organize a General Conference type of organization in 1951? Why? Here's another letter to Brother Mabutla from Kramer, Stable, and Dorschler. It's dated February 12, 1952. You can see this documentation. It says, nevertheless, do not forget that the American Union was the only union which stood decidedly from the beginning against the corruption of the leaders, and which, in spite of the brunt of the battle, has remained firm on the old platform. With us are also the original pioneers from 1914, Brother O. Velp and J. Adamczak, which are still in possession of the old General Conference Corporation documents. Now notice this. What is their grievance? The newly formed so-called General Conference of 1948 we never had and never will recognize. So the contention here by this group, which was there in Denver, headquartered in Denver, their contention was that the 1948 General Conference session was not recognized by them. It says already doubts are expressed by the leading men whether this gathering was altogether divinely appointed, since serious mistakes were made at the gathering. Since the days of Hitler's reign in Europe, the old General Conference disintegrated and has never been restored since, according to divine instructions. So, according to them, when Hitler dissolved the old General Conference, it never was reinstituted. We therefore have formed an international committee which looks after the interests of the scattered flock. Our work is too humble to adopt big-sounding names like General Conference. So as you can see, according to this information, in the year 1951, there were 3 General Conference presidents, all claiming to be part of what was at one time the Reform Movement. The American Union and their sympathizers had been separated from the main body since 1948, and they elected Brother Dorschler as their president. This group, they were not delegates at the 1951 session of the Reform Movement. Now, some among them were no longer even members of the Reform Movement. As you remember, some of them were disfellowshipped. Clearly, they were a separate organizational structure formed outside of the Reform Movement who have held 2 sessions after World War II, 1948 and 1951. The group that formed their registration in Sacramento, California in 1949, holding their General Conference session divided among themselves as well in 1951. We will cover that division shortly. One group elected Brother Carlos Kotzel as the president. The other group elected Brother Dmitry Nikolic as the president. As we will see later, neither group claimed affiliation with the Denver group. Both claimed to be the same leadership of the Reform Movement. And that's where we're going to come now, but in this study it needs to be clear that there are now 3 groups. The Denver group actually formed another General Conference. And we're going to look at that a little bit more deeper as we go into the 1951 session itself.
I'd rather have Jesus than silver or gold. I'd rather be His than have riches untold. I'd rather have Jesus than houses or lands. I'd rather be led by His nail-pierced hand than to be the king of a vast domain, or be held in sin's dread sway. I'd rather have Jesus than anything this world of This world